I'm Sandra D. Robinson, and welcome to The Divorce Project. Are you or someone you know going through a divorce or a custody battle? Well, this show offers legal guidance and caring solutions to help you create a healthy family dynamic as you're going through divorce and post-divorce. Soon, you'll meet the host of The Divorce Project, family law attorney Barry Fisher. Each show, Barry chooses family specialists, and he takes parents and children, and they talk about divorce. They focus on the positive outcomes and the wonderful mindsets that can happen when we all work together.
Hello, welcome to The Divorce Project. I'm Barry Fisher. I'm a family law attorney in Beverly Hills, and I specialize in family law, divorce, custody, visitation, everything having to do with family law. The purpose of the Divorce Project show is to bring information and teach you how to do a divorce in a conscious way. We have guests, psychologists, doctors, judges, lawyers, accountants that we bring on the show. And today we have a wonderful guest, Dr. Angela Bisada. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
She's a clinical psychologist. She specializes for 14 years in treating people with high conflict divorces. And believe me, that's a very, very difficult job. The name of this show, or the theme for this show, is how does the court view high conflict divorces? How do they help the parties, the parents, the lawyers in creating a healthy parenting plan for the children when there's a high conflict divorce? And today we're going to be moderated by Jody.
In your 26 years as a family law attorney, when parents are in disagreement about custody and visitation during their divorce proceeding, does the court have time to address all of the things that those two individuals really want to tell them?
You know, that's a great question, and things have changed a lot with budget cuts. You know, we hear on TV that there's not enough money in the state of California, and they're closing courtrooms. They're closing the Beverly Hills courthouse, they're closing the Malibu courthouse, and there are less judges and less courtrooms to hear these matters. So there's a great pressure on the court system. You know, one family law judge hears between 20 and 25 cases in one morning. That's from 8:30 with a 15-minute break from 10 to 10:15 till 12. So in 3.5 hours, they have to have 25 cases. They can't give you a lot of time. So you have to be very organized in your presentation. So the courts view it, tell me what's going on, tell me the most important things that are going on, so I can help you solve the problem that you have.
Very true, very true. Now, Dr. Bisada, when parents come to you, I imagine there's anger, there's frustration. How do you work with them to really be able to harness that so that they can best work with their attorney and present what's necessary to the court?
I think that trying to focus the parents on the children is very important because they love their children and they want the best for their children. And sometimes the anger and the difficulty of going through the divorce is taking its toll on them.
Right, right.
And so bringing them back to the child and seeing the child's point of view and what might be easiest for the child.
Right, right. I imagine, now Barry, when that client comes to you, how do you best manage that client information and really discern what the court needs to know?
Well, it's interesting. When clients first come to you, they're in such a state of anger, they're feeling betrayed, they're uncertain about their future, they're afraid about what's going to happen to them in the future. They don't know if they're going to, they have their kids every day, what's going to happen? Are they going to have enough money to pay their bills? So there's so much uncertainty, and there's so much fear that they want to make sure that the court hears every single thing that's occurred. And they give too much information. And my job is to filter through that, get the important information that's necessary to explain to the court what's going on, and present it.
Right, right. Now, Dr. Bisada, what happens when parents come to you and they express dislike about a new step-parent or perhaps another adult that may be a bad influence, and that individual is interfacing during the other parent's custody time?
What I try to do is I try to explore with the parent what their concerns are based on. Sometimes the child will bring them concerns because children have reunification wishes, and so someone new coming into the picture might not necessarily be what the child would like, or the child is concerned out of loyalty for this parent and that it might hurt their feelings, and so they might be reporting some negative things about the new addition to the family. And I also talk with the parent about what it is that they are concerned about. There's a difference between preferences and dangerousness. Preferences in parenting being that if they eat vegetarian or if they watch different television programs, handle the homework differently, these are all preference issues versus dangerousness issues where there are reports of something dangerous going on in the household.
Right.
You know, life has become very complicated because we now live in a society that 50% of all couples get divorced, and then they want to remarry in second and third marriages, and they have children. And so there's this issue of combining families, and how do you do it? And, you know, really it's very, very complex. And the best advice is to do it slowly and let everybody adjust and get to know each other before you push families together. Because if you don't, there's resentment, there's fear, there's anger. Am I being left out? Is one parent favoring, you know, their own children, or are they favoring the stepchildren? There's jealousies, there's insecurities. All of those things come up, and they come out in affecting the healthiness of the household.
Right, right. Are there times where the court has to interface and instruct the parents about how the communication between children and parents occur?
Well, the court, interfaces all the time. And there's some basic rules. Rule number 1, don't discuss anything about the case with your children. Rule number 2, don't say anything disparaging or negative about the other parent in front of the children. Rule number 3, don't argue in front of the children. Okay? So those 3 basic things go a long, long way. You know, when a court issues an order and the parent comes home and says, I won, I got you for more time, it's very detrimental to the children. So what the court says, when you tell your children, what I want you to do is say that mom and dad came up with a new plan and the court approved it, and this is what it is. And try to come with a combined front so that the children feel, wow, you know, mom and dad are starting to work together even though they're separate. That's positive. Right. That's a great way to do it. So that's what the court would suggest.
Okay. Dr. Posada, have you ever heard in your office where one child says that the stepchild is getting preferred treatment or more attention, or is there ever tension that the child expresses?
This actually happens quite often because sometimes when there's a divorce, the parents will remarry and they will have their own biological children, and so those children will be full-time with both parents versus the child that was part of the divorce previous has to move from household to household. And so a lot of times children will talk about how they don't have one home as they see their step or half siblings having one home, and also that sometimes what happens is they see another child having full-time access to their parent when they only have part-time access to that parent. And if they would like to spend more time with their parent, oftentimes I'll suggest to the parents to have alone time with that child since they only have access to the child part of the time.
Right.
You know, something that Dr. Posada just touched on, this idea that children have to go back and forth between two homes, it's the most devastating thing that happens to the child. It is so destructive. And, you know, if you can have a situation where the child lives in one house and the two parents live in other houses and come to visit the child, you've improved the situation by 1,000%. People don't consider that. They think kids are resilient, but, you know, when a child was living in one home and now has to live in two, that affects the child for the rest of the life. And it's very hard to get the child to process that out of their system and to have like a healthy existence. So it's a devastating item. So if you can stay together, stay together. But if you have to get a divorce, protect your children.
Absolutely. My goodness. Let's talk just for a moment about parenting plan. And, you know, Angela, Dr. Posada, do you find sometimes that parents are in agreement on enough issues that they can actually do that on their own?
In my type of work, usually not, unfortunately. But I think that with the use of a parenting plan, if it gets very specific and detailed in certain areas, it can really help to reduce the conflict that the child's exposed to and to reduce the communication between the parents to only the most necessary that's needed in order to help the child to have that predictability in their life.
Right.
Yeah, Dr. Posada is absolutely correct. If you have a detailed plan where you know, where the child knows where he's going to be for Hanukkah or Christmas or Easter or whatever the holiday is, the winter break, the spring break, the summer break, it takes away the uncertainty and it makes it easier for the child and the parents to run the respective households and be expected.
Makes a lot of sense. What about the monetary implications of these blended families? Barry, talk to me about if there's a modification in support or a request for that. How does that work?
That happens a lot. You know, people have issues because they have a child support order that they're obligated to pay to take care of their children from a marriage, and then they decide to combine with another family, get married, and now all of a sudden there are not 2 kids living in the house, there are 4 because there are 2 stepchildren. And they'll come back to court and they'll say, Your Honor, we need a reduction of child support because I'm not supporting 2 kids, I'm supporting 4. Well, the problem with that is that the obligation to support the stepchildren is really the obligation of their biological father, not the new stepdad. So the courts will say, you know, we understand your situation, but we're not going to give you a hardship deduction. We're not going to reduce your child support for that reason, unless there's some exceptional medical reason. If the stepchild had special needs, maybe then the court would consider that if the parent was taking that on. But other than that, the court's not going to reduce child support because you have a combined family.
Right, I understand. Dr. Posada, with regard to blended families or the emergence of blended families, what types of conversations do you recommend the parents have with the children in preparation for that?
Well, I usually recommend to parents when they ask me when should they introduce their children to a new person in their lives, what I tell them, what I recommend to them is not to do that until they know that it's a permanent relationship, as much as they can know, and that they shouldn't be sleeping in the same house with one another where the children are, that they should see them for dating, hopefully when the children are with the other custodial parent, so that the child isn't exposed to multiple parent type or adult figures that they develop an attachment to that might not be around. And I think that divorce in itself of your own parents is hard enough, and to add more abandonment and feelings of rejection can be very hard on the children.
I can imagine that. Does the court weigh in a situation like that where there may be disagreement about that new partner?
Well, the court weighs in wherever there's a problem, and you bring it to the court's attention. Is the court going to tell you that you can't be with this new partner? No, unless the new partner is a drug addict, an alcoholic, abusing the children. Then the court will say, you can be with this person, but these children cannot be with this person. Because the court can't order the parent not to be in a relationship with someone, but the court can order the parent that you're not allowed to bring these kids over to this step-parent's house ever, because there's a risk of danger. But if there's no danger, the court's not going to weigh in about it. You know, it's very complicated for children because parents, the biological parents, mom and dad, they have 2 different parenting styles. That's complicated for the child. Well, now you have step-parents, so you have maybe 3 or 4 different parenting styles. And, you know, it's very hard for the children to adjust to all these new situations.
Oh, I can imagine. Sometimes does that raise the bar of parenting in general when all of a sudden you have 4 sets of parents as opposed to 2 sets of parents? How does that play out with your clients? Has that come up? Dad's too strict and mom usually lets me get away with it. And I mean, how is there a way in which you can address this and try to create sort of that consistent message? What do you recommend?
What I try to communicate to children and teenagers is that they will get used to this to some extent. And I say the same to parents, is that although they might disagree with some of the specific parenting practices in the other household, as long as they're not dangerous or risky, that this is something that the child will get used to. It's something that one parent cannot control in the other household, and that it has its own consistency within each household. If this household lets the child go to bed an hour later, then the child knows that they'll go to bed an hour later at this household. So I try to help the parents not to focus so much on the differences, and the same with the children, to say, you know, this is how it is at Dad's house or Mom's house or Mama's house and Mom's house. This is how it is at these different places, and you will get used to how it is, even though it's different than how it was before.
Right, I can imagine.
You know, it's very interesting. The courts only want to do one thing. What is best for the child? They use the standard best interest for the child. And it's so interesting because the parents are coming in and saying, this is what's best for my child, this is my point of view. And, you know, the parents, if they really want to do something smart, they should sit down, work out the custody and parenting plan with each other, and don't ask the court to do anything except sign the order on the agreement that you signed. That would be the best thing for you as a parent and the best for your children. But so many parents can't do it. And they end up in these really long struggles. And the court system right now is so slow. You know, you can start a case now, but you may not finish it for 2 to 3 years. And, you know, custody orders are temporary until the kids are 18. So you could constantly come back. So if you have people that aren't agreeing, they're in court all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's not healthy for the children. High conflict is not healthy for the children.
Has there ever been a case, Barry, where the kids are in a joint custody situation, and as a result of a new parent stepping or whatever, the court rules for sole custody and removes a custody opportunity for the other parent?
Yeah, the purpose of the California legislature is to pass the laws to give guidance to the judges. Their guidance is they want everyone to have joint custody. So that's the starting point. So to get full legal custody, the other parent has to be absent, a drug addict, an alcoholic, an abuser, someone that's supposed to come and be with the children on certain scheduled times and days and never shows up, or hits the child, or disciplines the child in a physical way. So those kind of parents will lose custody. But if you're a loving parent and you care about your child, you're going to work out a joint custody. Now, there is an exception to that. If the two people can never agree and they never can come up with, let's put the kid in this school. No, I want him in this school. No, I want him in this school. If it's impossible to co-parent, then the judge will make one parent responsible, and the judge will do his best to pick which one is better for the child and will give that parent full legal custody. But that's to avoid the conflict with the other parent.
Wow, I understand. Dr. Posada, in cases where you have to weigh in with your opinion during a court proceeding, how does that feel to you? How is that? Is it usually very clear cut, that you have a very clear understanding of where you feel the children should or should not be between the two parents? And is it an opinion that you feel comfortable stepping forward and having go on the record, so to speak?
Well, thankfully for me, my ethics code states that I cannot make custody or visitation recommendations as the therapist. So as an evaluator, they can make those types of decisions. But related to what you're saying is that I will often be asked about what the child has shared about their time spent with their respective parents in their respective homes. There's also issues of if a child shares with me that they've been abused, that they've been exposed to domestic violence. These are things that I do have to testify about or share the information about. So I try as much as possible to keep my mind on the safety of the child, and I will make recommendations to the parents about, not specifically about custody and visitation, but about issues around custody and visitation, like drop off at school and the other parent picks up at school, so that the parents have the least contact possible in front of the child if they're unable to be in each other's presence without some kind of tension or overt conflict. So there are things like that that I might recommend to them, so that that will help with custody exchanges and visitation and help the child during visitation.
It keeps the stress level down all the way around.
Yeah, you know, as a follow-up to something that you said, Doctor, you know, the therapist, the clinical psychologist, and the patient, the children or child, are confident. The communications are confidential, and they're confidential because the code, the California Code, says they're confidential. But the reason they're confidential is to make the child feel secure and safe, that whatever the child's going to share, it's not going to be exposed. Neither parent's going to know, no one's going to know. This is my life, my story. It's just me and my therapist, and the therapy works because of that. So if the child's afraid that what the child said is going to be repeated in court, that's a problem. So what happens is parents have to sign a consent. Both parents have to consent to the psychologist testifying in court. And then the therapist has an obligation, if the child says, I'm going to hurt somebody, or if someone abused the child, she actually has an obligation to call and report it to Children's Services so they can investigate it. She's what's called a mandatory reporter. She has no choice. So if a child's sitting there and saying, you know, my dad beat me up yesterday and he punched me in the mouth and he threw me in the pool, when she's done, she has to pick up the phone and call. Now, I think it's terrible that parents make the disclosures that are from the child to the psychologist exposed in the courtroom. I think that should be protected. Now, it is protected by statute, but if both parents agree, it's going to come out. But you're hurting your child. Your child needs to know that it's safe to say the child's innermost thinking to the therapist. You don't want to take that away from the child.
So is it more a tactical move to get the parents to agree that that information is admissible?
What I do in high conflict cases, when I know it's important for the therapist to report, not about the child, but about which parent is causing the problem, I ask the parents to sign a consent form before the therapy starts, that allowing the therapist to testify and give information. And that way, there's no restriction on the therapist. She could come in and testify.
I understand. Wow. This is our last question. Dr. Posada, how important is it to have that attorney communication between yourself and between you and you have your client, and that everyone's aware of the fact that there is a proceeding in court, but to have that connection with the attorney who's basically running the show in court, how important is it to have that, to have a communication or a dialogue or a good relationship with the attorney who's actually overseeing the case in court?
Well, actually, what happens, unfortunately, is that first of all, when the child has their own attorney, then that attorney holds privilege for the child, and I can speak with that attorney openly and easily and share information, and that attorney can go to the court and present that information to the court. But in the case of when I'm seeing a child and the parents are divorced, I usually don't speak much to their respective attorneys. And when I do, it's always the same information in written form to both attorneys,
right.
Because what happens, unfortunately, is that these parents can sometimes feel distrustful, and if they in some way feel that you are more aligned with one attorney than the other, that would reflect your being more aligned with one parent than the other. So I really have to work hard to maintain a neutral position, both for the child's benefit, but also so that the parents feel confident that I'm focused on the child and not taking sides.
Wow, this is a great topic. I wish we could go on for another hour on it. So.
I want to thank you, Jody, for being the moderator, and thank you, Dr. Basada, for being here.
Thank
we
you.
loved having you,
You're
and we want to
welcome.
have you again. And we want to thank KBEV Studios. This program is fully produced by Beverly Hills High School students, and they do everything from the camera work to the mixing to the editing and putting it in and broadcasting up on KBEV TV. And they're all directed by Romeo Carey, who's a wonderful director of the program. We want to thank you for tuning in to the Divorce Project. We're going to be on the show every week, and our program is going to be running. And if you have questions, there's going to be directions at the end of the show where you can email in your questions or call us. And thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
We thank you for tuning in, and we invite you, our viewing audience, to participate in next week's conversation. On the Divorce Project, our goal is to help bring you the healthy outcome that your family deserves. So please email your questions to team@thedivorceproject.com or call us directly at the number on your screen.